The Holodomor was a gruesome famine that resulted from collectivization practices during the end of Stalin's first 5-year plan and the start of the second 5-year plan. The rapid collectivization efforts and the attempts to decimate the peasantry of any kulaks, on top of unrealistic grain requisition quotas, has made many scholars point out that this period of 1932 to 1933 was a man-made famine. The harvest was a good one as well. Peasants who took even scraps from the field were sentenced and executed. Many countries now recognize this heinous act of man-made famine, resulting in the deaths of millions of Ukrainian peasants, kulaks, and other class enemies as a genocide. In December of 1932, a campaign to introduce passports in the USSR began. However, peasants really didn't get a passport issued to them. They had to ask permission to leave their villages, and thus tied peasants to their villages. As Ukraine was turned into a famine territory, Soviet officials banned Ukrainians and Kubans from traveling to other cities in Russia and Belarus. This ensured that these ethnic groups, and several others, would suffer with a very small chance of survival. Over 3.9 million people died as a direct result of the Holodomor, and 600,000 died indirectly. Following the horrors of the Holodomor, Soviet authorities began their misinformation campaign to keep details of the famine censored through various methods: destruction of over 100,000 official documents from the governmental archive, harassment of those who wrote in diaries describing the famine, and labor camps. One of those authors who wrote and was subsequently harassed for their writing was Dmitro Zavaloka. In his diary from 1932, we see many of the horrors already beginning to form due to the collectivization processes. In 1936, Zavaloka was sentenced to years in a concentration camp for his diary and the opinions held within. We will now hear a portion of his diary. From the diary of Dmitro Zavaloka, March 14th, 1932. At 12 o'clock at midnight, I am to drive to Barash. These collective farmers are completely without bread, even without potatoes. And that is why, in a number of collective farms of the district, Barash, Novi Yablonets, Usoluisia, Babritsia, Kiani, and others, collective farmers steal even food meant for pigs, mixed fodder, bake flat cakes from this, and eat it. In some of the collective farms, seed grain is being eaten, and the general impression is as if the country were suffering through a difficult famine, or on the eve of mass starvation. The methods of grain procurement were overly leftist. For the most part, naked administrative methods were used. Mass searches, arrests, and in general, completely unjustified arbitrariness was allowed. The population, beginning with the well-to-do kulak stratum and ending with the poor collective farm peasant, was intimidated and terrorized. In the resolutions of the district party committees, there were various preemptive resolutions of the authorities against leftist excesses and lawlessness, but in fact, no struggle was undertaken against such manifestations. Moreover, even the DPC went down the road of naked administrative methods, forming an operative troika under the direction of the DPC secretary, before which the full complement of the delegated village council and the administration of the collective farm were summoned for a chastening, accompanied by arrests, intimidation, and so on. As a result of all this work, the district, for all of that, fulfilled only 66 to 69% of the grain procurement plan. At present, the state of preparation of seed stocks is especially dangerous. Across the whole district, 40% have been prepared. There's almost no hope of significantly increasing this amount. Hence the danger that almost 50% of the fields for sowing will remain unplowed in the spring. Even if the whole seed stock were available, there is still the danger that many of the collective farmers will not go to work, as they have no food. That is today, and what will happen when the harvest is to be gathered? Then there will be even fewer food resources than there are now, and again, there will be the danger that the sown fields will not be harvested in time, or that a portion will perish completely. To what end was such a tense situation created in the village, and especially in the collective farm sector? Could this undesirable confrontation have been avoided? Clearly it could have. There should have been greater attention to the needs of the populace, above all, to their needs for food. March 19th, 1932. Mother was already here yesterday, but only today did we have a frank conversation. The situation at home is especially difficult. For several months, there has been no bread in the house. They live on potatoes and potato pancakes. The children are developing acute anemia, Misha, Kolya, Vitya, and they often complain of dizziness. Bread appears in the house only when Mother returns from Kiev and brings presents. Earlier, when Mother would begin to talk about her affairs and bring up hunger and malnutrition, I did not believe it. I did not listen attentively to those conversations and said, "Mama, why are you falling for enemy agitation and blabbering about all sorts of kulak frights?" And I would turn the conversation to jokes and assure her that nothing terrible could take place, that the state and the party would not allow it. But today, when she again began to talk to me about this, and her voice quivered near weeping, while her face showed tearful spasms and her eyes glistened with tears, I could not but feel that heavy, hopeless state in which our household is living. I did not know how to respond to her words. I was helpless to cheer her up in any way, and only managed to say that the situation would not last long. It could not be that the party was taking no notice of the way people all around were living, and if there were instances of hunger, this would soon be corrected. I do not know whether she believed me or not. She is constantly perturbed whether, in fact, it will come to placing one's hopes only on those seed funds that the people have and on the food available for spring work. According to Mother's words, the collective farmers do not have anything at all. April 22nd, 1932. We conversed almost the entire evening, Mother and I. She had come to buy bread for the holidays. We talked a great deal, but I heard nothing of any good thought or event, and this was not really a conversation, but, in essence, Mother's narrative about current village life, and her own, of course. According to her words, the peasants have never before lived as they do now. Never have the people suffered as they do now. The peasants are oppressed to the uttermost, and that is why they are living as they do. Their enemies never lived this way, and it is also bad for the workers. To the question of how the sowing campaign was proceeding, there is also a reply that paints an unhappy picture. The people are working, but moving as if barely alive. They gather at 9 in the morning, but then, by the time tasks are assigned, before they begin to work, give them something to eat, and for food, they give 3/4 of the type of bread that you cannot force down your gullet. Well, and with bread they boil hot broth once. As for those who stay home, the little ones, the elderly, the sick, do not even mention them. They are left on their own, even to die. Yes, it is extremely difficult to hear and learn about the condition of the peasantry, and we, the party, have consciously brought this about with our line, our behavior, our leadership. June 12th, 1932. Only 2,417,367 hectares of the spring fields have been sown, or 57.1% of the plan. This is as of the 10th of June. The possible time for sowing has passed. Sowing after the 10th of June is more hopeless for germination and even more so for yield. This means that in Kiev Oblast alone, almost 2 million hectares of unsown field remain. As of the 10th of June, only 314,170 hectares of potatoes have been planted, which constitutes 56.7% fulfillment of the plan. The results of spring sowing are more than catastrophic. In the aftermath of the newspaper observations, a comrade commented, "I heard that when Molotov was in our oblast, he said, 'Through our mistakes this year, we have set back the agricultural economy of Ukraine a number of years.' What he said was absolutely true if one believes that it was he who said this. But he was also present precisely when the grain procurements were in full swing and our mistakes were at their worst. I was unable to object to this, but only thought how profoundly true were the words spoken by Molotov or someone else to the effect of setting back our agricultural economy a number of years. And that pertains not only to the unsatisfactory state of sowing this year, but to all the ruination that has occurred in agriculture. Almost 40 to 50% of the horse herd has died. The number of horned cattle has decreased more than twice. Pigs are decreasing in number. Smaller livestock is almost wiped out. The peasants from the villages have dispersed and scattered to the four corners. If not all, then a considerable portion. Political confidence in the Soviet government has been catastrophically shaken, and it is strange that in all these matters, the fault remains that of distortions at the local level, which the CC of the party indicated in timely fashion. And certainly there will be no quick re-release of the outstanding historical explanations of the party chief, Comrade Stalin, concerning the reasons for the distortions and the next steps for dealing with them. Just as it was with regard to the question of collectivization in 1930, when the guilty were whoever you please, but not the CC. For the latter indicated more than once the danger of dizziness with success. How despicable to engage in self-criticism and not admit to one's own mistakes. What is the use of a leadership that cannot see the destruction resulting from its own deeds, is unable to prevent catastrophe in timely fashion, and then does not have the courage and decency to admit its own mistakes?